Thanks for staying with us. Now, what do investors think about when they want to make an investment in a country when they've made it and they have issues around security? A year later, officials are promising the crime that occurred in July will never happen again. Let's discuss this and also a broader conversation about the July unrest with Chris Gilmore, who's an independent investment analyst, Fatima Cohen, who is the Deputy Chairperson of the Human Rights Commission. We'll also be joined by Thapelo Mohapi, who's the General Secretary of Abahlali Basum Jondolo. Unfortunately, he has network issues, but for now we are joined by the Human Rights Commission as well as Chris Gilmore. Thank you both so much for your time. We do appreciate it. Fatima, let's perhaps just start with you. The Human Rights Commission has had extensive hearings into the July unrest. It's something that this country has never seen before. Perhaps just your perspective a year on, and many would say not much has been done to try and sort this out.
Well, yes, I imagine that when that kind of statement is made, people are referring to whether or not the authorities have any leads pertaining to the instigators of the violence. And certainly out of the media conference yesterday of the security cluster, it seems to us that basically they're still under investigation. The Minister of Police did indicate that there are 86 people of interest. And this clearly isn't evidence, it's just people of interest. He also indicated that about 19 people have been arrested and they're out on bail. It begs the question as to, whether in fact the evidence against the 19 odd people who were arrested is airtight. So it seems to me that authorities are still very much at the investigation stages.
Chris, perhaps we could bring you in here. You are based in London, but you spent most of your life here in South Africa. And having seen the July unrest and having seen how destructive that was and how it just went on for days without there being authorities to be able to try and put a stop to it. From somebody who's not in the country at the moment, how do you see things?
Heidi, it was appalling. A year on, as you say, nothing has been done. And I agree with the former speaker, the previous speaker. If it's taken a year and nothing has happened, then, in my opinion, they're chasing the wrong leads. They're going down the wrong road. So, something really has to happen, because if it doesn't, then it sends out completely the wrong signals to foreign investors, to prospective foreign investors. I know for a fact that during the July unrest, certain companies, just to stay alive, had to elicit people like Congolese mercenaries just to keep their plants open, because the police were worse than useless. The army were worse than useless. It was down to individuals just to try and do anything they possibly could to keep going. Now, again, that sends out completely the wrong signals to foreign investors, to prospective foreign investors. So when the president says that South Africa is open for business, yeah, well, it's all very well to talk like that, but in reality, in KZN, a year ago, it really was not open for business at all.
Fatima, I want to bring you in here, and this is why we wanted the Human Rights Commission on, to bring the human element to this. When I had tweeted to say that we're going to be having a panel discussion about the July unrest, somebody responded, and I think it's so important to say we need to speak about the lives that were lost. As much as there were billions of rands that were also lost and businesses had to completely shut down, over 350 people sadly lost their lives. And the Human Rights Commission, having had those hearing from top government officials, but also the people that were directly impacted or lost loved ones. How vital is it for the Human Rights Commission to get involved and perhaps come out with the report to truly get to the bottom of what happened?
I think it is vitally important for the country to understand the complex nature of what unfolded in July. And yes, 348 lives lost in the process is something quite momentous in any country's history. But more than that, Heidi, you had a situation which really traumatized the nation. A very young democracy faced, I think, one of its biggest challenges. And it is, therefore, very, very important that both the authorities, but also bodies like the Human Rights Commission, try to explain what occurred, why it occurred, and for the reasons that we do not ever want to see this situation unfold in our country ever again.
Chris, I want to speak about the economic impact that this has had. You briefly touched on how this does not bode well for investment, where people are looking at our country and going, I don't want to put my toe in that country because I don't know what's going to happen moving forward. This surely has had a massive impact on future investment, especially because the country is being seen to not being able to truly get to the bottom of what happened.
Unfortunately, you're quite right. And look, I think we have to say at the outset that all foreign investors have to deal with a bewildering array of different challenges, different problems in different countries. And up until July last year, South Africa's problems, although they seemed immense to most South Africans, in actual fact, they weren't radically different to the kind of problems that are the order of the day in many developing countries. This, I think, turned it turned it into something pretty ugly and pretty, I wouldn't say unique, but it made it an awful lot worse. So as we go down the road, as we go into the rest of this year, into next year, what we're now facing is the possibility, and The Economist magazine has done a very good model that correlates food inflation with social unrest in a variety of countries. And it works very, very well, this model. So it shows you that the higher food inflation goes, the greater the likelihood of social unrest. Now, again, without even going down the road of pointing fingers at any political parties or individuals or factions or whatever, just having food inflation sustained at these kind of levels for any length of time could well result in a higher general degree of social unrest in South Africa and in a number of other developing economies around the world.
Fatima, I want to ask you about the possible deeper meaning to all of this. Of course, many are saying that it's not just because of the arrest of former President Jacob Zuma that sparked this unrest, but it was the desperation of many South Africans struggling to survive. Yes, there were people who took opportunities, but would you say that, what we saw last year speaks to deeper socioeconomic issues that South Africa faces and that's actually not being addressed?
Yes, certainly. I think it will be foolish of us to not understand that regardless of what we find in terms of who instigated the unrest, the fact of the matter is in certain communities, those instigators found a tinderbox ready to be lit. And in our investigations, we certainly, as we operated on the ground during and shortly after the unrest, what we found were several social stresses pertaining in those communities that participated in the looting and the violence and the destruction. Poverty, endemic poverty, being a common denominator, coupled with a culture of violence and growing lawlessness in many of these informal settlements, as well as a growing culture, I think, in some of these communities of entitlement. All of these are toxic mixes that pertain in several hotspots around the country. And if we are going to not repeat the events of July 2021, It's important for South Africa, both in terms of the state, but also ordinary South Africans, to realize that it was two elements coming together in a toxic mix that led to the unrest. And all of us really have to do more to develop a greater social and human solidarity in these poorer communities. And certainly it wouldn't help for government to be more efficient in terms of law enforcement, in terms of housing delivery, in terms of poverty alleviation programs.
Certainly. Luckily, we've now been joined by Tapela Mohapi, who is the General Secretary of Abahlali Basemjondolo. I know you were having network issues, but thank you so much for joining us. I do hope your network stays. We are having a discussion about the July unrest and what this all means and whether or not government has truly been able to get to the bottom of what happened. Perhaps your views a year on and not much has been done. Unfortunately, he's frozen. It doesn't seem like we have... Oh, there we go. Okay, there he is. Okay, let's try one more time.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon to the panelists. Good afternoon to you as well, and the viewers. As Abahlali Basemjondolo, we had seen the riots take place in twofold. There were those who had, after the arrest of the former president, decided to go to the streets, but it also unveiled the socio-economic conditions that people in the informal settlement, the poorest of the poor, the marginalized, people with no services, people who are still struggling to access basic services as water, such as water and sanitation in the of it, taking the opportunity to the unrest for us, fundamental issues that we have not, and we have passed racial issues, the things that happened in Phoenix, where across the townships that were created by so improve the lives. People continue to live in dire poverty and rates. Opportunism on agendas will be used because people are still hungry, people are still starving, people have no direction.